I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Fat City.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we're going to be watching Dancer in the Dark. This is a film you've been advocating for for the last
Yeah.
couple of weeks now, and I think you've just beaten me down. I'm ready. I think
Yeah,
we've
we gotta
watched
watch it now.
we gotta watch it now. We've been watching a lot of tougher, I don't know if tougher is necessarily the right word, but definitely a little more out there
Good
stuff
good
this year
movies.
than we
Yeah,
have been watching a lot of good movies this year. It's probably been our strongest year on the
that's how
podcast,
I would say.
but a lot of, for me at least, more challenging stuff. I mean, stuff like Anatomy of Hell or Tetsuo the Iron Man, stuff that really kind of pushes the limits and really explores different
Sure.
different places
Mhm.
than is typical for me. And so I obviously I've
Yeah.
seen Lars von Trier before. I've seen some of his most famous work, like Melancholia and Dogville and Nymphomaniac, both part one and two, and Antichrist. So I'm very
I
familiar
don't
with
think
Lars
I've
von
seen
Trier.
any of his things. I'm
You haven't
not
seen
familiar with
any
him at
Lars
all.
von
I
Trier?
don't know
That's
why.
crazy.
Maybe I've watched one. I don't know why I haven't. I just haven't gotten around to him, despite the fact that he is probably one of our more famous contemporary like directors, especially
Yeah,
contemporary foreign directors. I don't know. I just never really his movies are long.
that's
His movies
true.
are always like they always seem like they're over 2 hours long. So maybe that kind of like turned me off of that. Not
Yeah,
that like I'm not like necessarily a person that like is always gravitating toward short films, but
right.
maybe that is an aspect to it. But I've always wanted to watch Dance in the Dark because it features one of my all-time favorite musicians, Bjork.
Uh-huh.
She is in the movie. I love Bjork. And I guess this movie was so difficult to make because it's such a miserable film
Sounds
that she
about right.
basically like swore off acting. She like quit. Like, and I don't think she's ever really like properly acted in a movie in a while. But she was in that new Robert Eggers movie. She was in uh not Nosferatu, The Northman, or I think it's called The Northman, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She played a very minor role in that movie. Yeah. So besides like maybe stuff here and there, like she's never really done anything. I'm sure she's great at, but yeah, we'll see.
Well, I am very excited for another Lars von Trier experience. If you're gonna go
Mhm.
into Lars von Trier, the way I got into him was through Melancholia. I think that was the very first one that I watched. And then after Melancholia, I watched Nymphomaniac 1 and 2. And then I kind of got some of the other stuff. I think Dogville, it was like an early Lars von Trier collection. And Melancholia for me is still really strong. Lars von Trier, there's a lot of people who have. He's definitely someone who kind of splits the road, right? There's not a lot of people who are kind of mid on Lars von Trier. He some people love him to
I guess.
death. Some people hate his guts as a filmmaker, as a director, as an artist, and his films definitely do that. So I'm excited for this, and I'm surprised you haven't seen any Lars von Trier because Lars von Trier definitely feels like someone you would have a spiritual connection to at least. So I'm excited for Dance in the Dark. Maybe it'll be an excuse for me to watch a little more Lars von Trier, but I didn't even realize how much of Lars von Trier I'd actually seen. And until we just started talking about it, and I was looking at the letterbox, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I've seen that film. I've seen that film. I've seen that film." So I've seen
That's interesting.
way more of his work than I would have expected from a director that I'm not personally inspired by, but a lot of the filmmakers I work with are huge Lars von Trier fans. One of the
He also
directors,
just seems like an asshole, to be honest. Like he
he
just kind of
does
like
as a
he
human
just has
being,
like a lot of
yeah.
like stupid things. Yeah, yeah, and maybe not a great human being. He has Parkinson's though, so I think like his
Really?
time
I didn't know that.
in yeah I think that his time like working is um yeah, on February 2nd, 2025, a producer on Instagram said Von Trier had been admitted to a care facility for the condition. So I think like his time is as a filmmaker is coming to an end, it appears.
Wow. Well, that's too bad. That's too bad to hear. If whether, of course, obviously as a human being, but he was definitely is definitely a filmmaker out there making the work that he wants to make. And if nothing else, I think that is something to aspire to and be inspired by. But this week we got to watch a director that we actually watched one of their films
Yeah,
pretty recently, which
not
I
too long
didn't.
ago.
I didn't realize. I
Yeah.
forgot that Maltese Falcon is,
I
of course, the
I
most
remember
famous.
that. I
Uh-huh.
remember that, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter.
It's
Like the
okay.
John Huston
It's fine.
style is it's fine. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like in terms of like I think there are plenty of different things to talk about between both movies.
I think so. I mean, Maltese Falcon is a very different movie than Fast.
Yeah, it
Obviously,
is.
it still has some of the John Huston things to it, and it still has his direction style. Definitely still has his eye. He has a very specific eye, but they are very
Mhm.
different points in his career, right? I think they come out almost 30 years apart. If I'm not
Yes.
mistaken, right? Maltese Falcon comes out in the early 40s or late 30s, and this film came out in
Yes.
1972. And one of the
Mhm.
things that I love about this film, and it's true with 1970s in general, is just the film stock that they use has this sort of
Mhm.
like most of the film stock they use for 1970s films has this really like orange kind of yellow tint to it. And I don't know if that's has more to do with just the chemical process of the color grading that they're doing at the time or the type of the film that they're using. It's not Technicolor. They're not using Technicolor in this film, in a lot of the films of this time, or maybe it's just the cost of this type of film is cheaper, so there's a lot of filmmakers using this type of film. But I do really love this sort of hazy yellow, super grainy look to this
Mhm.
film, especially
Yeah, it
because
does have a
it
yellowy
is
tint.
shot and supposed to take place in Stockton, California, and so they use
Beautiful Stockton,
beautiful
California.
Stockton, California. They
Have
even
you
go
ever
to
been to Stockton, California? I don't think it's very far from you, right?
it. Stockton, California is not far from me. I've driven through it a lot because we go to places like
Oh,
Monterey,
really?
Sacramento, San
You've driven through that beautiful
Francisco.
town? How could you do that?
it, it does not look that different. I'm not gonna lie. Stockton,
Oh,
California,
cool.
it's
Yeah.
not. I mean, no offense to
Cool.
anyone listening to this that
Yeah.
lives in Stockton, California. It's fine as a city, but
But I love it. I love that's the best part of Fat City is that like yeah is like one of the best parts of it is like being in Stockton, California. You know what I mean? Just hanging out. Like that's probably John Huston's like his sense of place is very he does a good job with it in the movie.
yeah, and it's. I mean, I've seen, of course, a lot of John Huston films, kind of the whole span, right, from Maltese Falcon to Annie to
He's
this and a lot
he's
of his
kind of
other
weird
work.
because it's like he's weird because like when you look through his movies, he's like made a lot of like novel adaptations, like
Yeah.
Fat City, Maltese Falcon, um, The Man Who Would Be King, Casino Royale, The Dead, which is the James Joyce story,
Hmm.
Moby Dick, like Wise Blood, Under the Volcano. I don't know why, but he just seems like really like preoccupied with like adapting novels for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge part of his career. And even Annie was a Broadway play. So he's definitely an adapter. Like a lot of his films are adaptations of plays or musicals or books. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. I don't know what John
Hey, could you
Huston's.
give me 1 second? Sorry,
Yeah.
could I mute you for a second?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
It's all right. It happens.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Let's continue.
All right. And we are back. One of the things that I was thinking about going to this movie, and I think it's an interesting comparison, and I thought of this as like a really interesting double feature because I always think of films in sort of their counterparts, right? I kind of like to put them in the world of like, how would this experience be if I saw a movie right before or right after it? Because every movie is always inspired by another movie, and there's always these connections. And of course, there's a very like famous trend of boxing movies, and all the way back to like very early cinema. And of course, you have things like Rocky and of course Raging Bull. And I'm thinking of some like those early kind of 1940s kind of gangster style boxing movies. And the thing that surprised me about this movie, and I think this is sort of the subversion of this movie, is of course you can't go into a movie like this when it's talking about class and poverty and not think of something like Rocky, right? That's kind of like the thing that comes to me first. And sort of this Rocky's a very feel-good movie, right? You hear the music playing and you
Yeah.
get very excited and you're like, "Oh yeah, and he's gonna go fight and all that." And this is
And he doesn't
definitely
win, but he sort of wins.
he
Yeah.
doesn't win, but like in a way he does win because like just showing up to the fight was
Right.
like the most important part. And what's crazy about this movie is it's called a boxing movie, but there's like three boxing scenes. in this whole movie. I mean,
Mhm.
very little of the movie is actually boxing. Now, to be fair, the boxing scene near the end where he has that big fight is an absolutely incredible scene. I
That's a
mean,
great scene.
it looks beautiful. It's just really great boxing. He's get all cut up, he's all bloody, and just the look on his face, like that just emptiness, that blankness, or when he wins the fight and he asks if he got knocked out, like that is just an incredible and beautiful moment. And just the haze going around and like the use of color and blacks and whites is
Mhm.
just absolutely beautiful and magnificent. And yet, even when he wins, this isn't a triumphant moment, right? We don't feel like, oh yeah, he did it, he did
Yeah.
the thing. Especially because that scene is right juxtaposed with the very next scene, and he's in the car and he's talking to his manager. He's like, I won the fight. What's my
Yeah.
cut?
He's like getting upset about money. Yeah.
He's like, it's a lousy $100, right? You put in all this work, you put in all this time, and part of it is just because he feels cheated, right? His problem is he's kind of caught up in the past. Of course, there's this sort of dichotomy between him and a young Jeff Bridges, which, by the way, I think this is the earliest film I've ever seen Jeff Bridges in. I mean, it's got to be a very early Jeff Bridges film,
Yeah. He looks like he's like
1972.
17 or 18 or
He looks
something
like a
like that.
baby,
Yeah. He looks crazy.
which is very strange because, when I think of Jeff Bridges, I'm thinking of something like, a Coen Brothers
The
film,
dude.
like The Dude, right? And
Yeah.
so to see a young Jeff Bridges is a little strange. But I mean, one of the very first scenes of the movie, right, is that juxtaposition of the two of them boxing. He kind of sees a younger
Yeah.
version of
That's a
himself.
great scene. Hmm.
And he, there's kind of the sense of like, you can kind of not fuck up in the way I did, right? Like I kind of ruined my own life, and he
Yeah.
sees that and he recognized that, and there's
Yeah.
this
It's
sense
very
of,
ironic.
yeah, the sense of loss, right? Like as if things have been stolen from him. I mean, his big failure sort of throughout the film is that he can't take the blame for anything that's happened in his life, right? Everything is someone else's
Yeah.
fault. He definitely has this addictive, alcoholic quality about him where no matter what happens, even now or in the past, it's always because of something that someone did to him. And yeah, he was kind of given some like dirty hands, and he lost a big fight. And when they tell that scene is a great moment, but it's very clear that it's his own inability to let go of his past, right? His own inability to move on that is his failure. And to see sort of his falling trajectory versus Jeff Bridges' trajectory, which again is another situation where you actually see that him fight one, maybe two times, and they're very early fights. And right, they're not him at his best because I was expecting this to be sort of a situation where, oh, you have this old grumbly fighter, right? He's kind of out of the ring and he trains this young fighter to become this big grand fighter, and they go through all these boxing matches and all that. But it's not that, right? It's it's the very strange thing about this film is again, it's not about boxing. It's almost not even a sports movie. Like the sports is kind of secondary to the story itself.
Isn't that what all sports movies should be though?
I mean, yeah,
Wait. I mean, Austin, like if you watch a sports movie, have you ever been like, oh, I wish there were more footage of the game, like more footage of the baseball game. Like I don't like I guess I don't understand what you're talking about in that regard.
well, I mean, obviously, like even if you talk about one of my favorite sports movies like Moneyball, of course it's not really about Moneyball, right? It's kind of the things that behind it, and the friends you make along the way, blah blah blah. But like the game itself, whatever the sports game is, typically it's sort of a center stage, and it's kind of a metaphor for the
Yeah.
world at large. I mean, even like Rocky, like, yeah, it's not really about the fight, but everything is leading up to that, right? That's kind of it's the plot device that moved it forward. Where in this, I mean, I guess you could kind of say like that last fight in the end, they're kind of moving towards that, but not
Yeah.
really,
But
right? Like,
it's small peanut like it's so like the stakes are so low, right, in that
yeah.
fight, right? Like it's not a heavyweight championship fight. It's not like like the Rocky fight where it's like him versus, Creed, right? Like which
Hmm.
is like a really big deal because of course Creed is like a championship fighter or whatever and he's fighting a nobody, right? There's like that underdog quality. Like in this, yeah, and then like the final fight in like Fat City and pretty much all of the fights throughout the movie, it's just like no names like fighting each other, right? Like there's like absolutely no stakes at all. Obviously, everybody wants to win and stuff, but like there is kind of like a sort of like sad, pathetic quality to it of like just of like just like everything, right? Like everybody's like really ugly and everybody's really drunk all the time. Everybody is like poor, they live in Stockton and it sucks. And they get to do this fighting thing, and the Stacy Keach character, um he's like pretty good at boxing, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like he's like not bad at it.
Yeah.
But he's not like amazing at it still. You know what I mean? Like this isn't a movie about like people who are amazing at boxing. It's just like a movie about like people that are just like kind of okay at it. You know what I mean? And they can kind of, they sort of provides them with like a little bit of like a reputation,
Hmm.
right? But it's like nothing. It's like in the grand scheme of things like it's just kind of it's not that fulfilling.
Yeah. And that's, I don't know if that's heartbreaking or perhaps realistic, but I think there's always this sort of fantastical element of sports movies, right? I think of that one of the final scenes in Moneyball. How can you not be romantic about baseball, right? This beautiful moment where, Jonah Hill shows Brad Pitt this scene of this guy, right? He's running to first base, and he falls, he slips, blah blah blah, and it's just like this kind of beautiful metaphor for life and baseball and just kind of like all the things intermingled with it. And this isn't that movie, right? This isn't that movie where you have that inspiring moment if you're like, oh, how can you not be romantic about boxing,
Yeah.
right? And this is coming from someone who did box, right? All through high school. I love to box. I did it out of high school a little bit. I still spar every now and then. It's a sport that I'm very interested in and very involved in.
Mhm.
And I can say this is probably the most accurate in depiction of sort of the low stakes quality that are boxing. Because even if
Mhm.
you are in a state where boxing is big, it's usually just a room full of a couple of people going to watch the match, right? It's not
Yeah.
like, unless you're at the professional level, it's not like high school football game or a high school basketball game. Like the stakes just aren't
Yeah, it's
that
a
high.
lonely sport.
It's a
And
very low.
it's also not like it's also a sport in which it's not two teams fighting each other. It's just like two individual like people fighting each other. That's
Mhm.
it.
And I think this film has a lot to do with this idea of isolation and being alone and sort of the different paths you take. I mean, one of my favorite scenes in this film, and I wouldn't say Emily watched this film with me. I had to watch it last night because we were recording today and there really wasn't another time to watch it before last night. And so Emily had her headphones on, she was reading a book, and so she'd kind of look up every now and then, paying as little attention as physically possible because she's just convinced that if we're watching it for the podcast, she's not going to enjoy the movie. And the one scene that she did actually watch, which is one of my favorite scenes, is the scene where he is making his girlfriend dinner, like the peas and steak,
Yeah, great scene.
which is just like the
Yeah.
perfect
They just have
embodiment.
like it's like a argument over nothing.
It's an argument for nothing. And like these are the best kind of arguments because they're the most like it's a film that feels very, when I say it feels very real, like that feels inauthentic, I guess when I say that, but I do mean that it feels very close to home and it doesn't, I mean, I think because the stakes are so low, right? That they're not going to win
Yeah.
$1 million. They're not going to change the world. It's just these tiny
No.
little stakes. Like he's just boxing because he needs to make a living, right? There's nothing bigger here at the end. There's no grander thing. And this isn't some metaphor
Mhm.
for life or, some philosophical thing beyond it. It's merely like he needs money to survive. Like he doesn't have the ability to keep any job. There's that great line in that same scene. I think it's in that scene. No, it's a different scene, but it's at that same location, which is that little apartment, which all the locations, by the way, really great locations. Really interesting looking at this film and looking at Maltese Falcon, because of course Maltese Falcon is shot almost entirely on sets, right? Studio sets.
Mhm.
And a lot of this work is shot on location and really great location work. I think arguably one of the best things about this film is the ability, as you were saying earlier, just to create the sense of like space and location and they go to all these like really cool places, and they all feel very real, whether they are real or not. And that apartment is one of my favorite locations. And he has this line where he says, you know, I haven't found a job that I like yet. Kind of this idea that
Yeah.
work isn't something you enjoy. Work is just something that you do that pays your bills, and that's it. And that is a very depressing way
Mhm.
to live life, right? Just this idea that yeah, I just work because I gotta live, I gotta eat.
Right. And that's a big part of the movie where they go to like the farms, right? To like
Mhm.
harvest like onions and stuff like that. That's a big part of the book where they like go and like go to the farms to get like a little bit of money, right? Like
Yeah,
a hard day's work of just like harvesting onions, harvesting walnuts, whatever, because it is California. So, there's like probably farms all over the place.
there are.
But yeah, they're just like there's nothing else to do. So, there's a there's
That's
no
what you
other
do for work.
industry, I guess, nearby.
Yeah, it's driving through California. Of course, there's farms everywhere. There's a huge, obviously, agricultural industry there, and there's seasons for everything, right? There's a season for onions, there's a season for artichokes, there's a season for this, and I've I have a lot of friends who live in California, work in California, and there's kind of this seasonality, right? This is the crop that you work in this time of the year, and this is the crop that you work in that time of the year. And even though this film is 53 years old now, the way we harvest these crops, the science hasn't
Yeah.
changed, right? It's still the cheapest way to kind of get these
Yeah, to
things
get
because
like workers. Yeah.
like it's cheaper to get workers, right, than try to find the right the very expensive tools that you would need to get it on your own or that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So and that's a big part of kind of Nevada's agriculture too. Like there's a lot, even though when people think of Nevada, they kind of think of the desert. There's a lot of agriculture here, and a lot of it is migrant workers, right? People who come to this country specifically for work. And of course, there's that sense of kind
Yeah.
of being preyed on, right? They're not getting paid minimum wage.
Yeah.
There's no real standards that come with it. And that's not to say that this film is kind of pinpointing that, but it's definitely not, it's
Yeah.
definitely aware of it, to say the least, right? He spends a lot of time working on these
Mhm.
farms and right, surrounded by people who are also working on these farms and kind of just this really interesting and I think honest way of seeing work. I think there is the sense, and maybe this is just sort of the American capitalist kind of way of seeing work as this thing that elevates everyone. And right, if you just work hard, you can become a millionaire or you can become the best. And the sad fact of the matter is you can work harder than anybody, right? You can work really hard, and it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter, right? You can kind of end up in the same place. Like some of the hardest jobs in the world are those jobs that are paid minimum wage or even less than minimum wage. Like people are not getting paid based on how hard they are working. That is not how, unfortunately, the world works. And that's definitely an exploration in this film is, and obviously he has a lot of other problems. And I think of those scenes
Mhm.
with Jeff Bridges and his girlfriend, which at first, like that first scene
Mhm.
where it's raining and they're in the car, and
Yeah.
she reveals that she's no longer a virgin, right? I thought I would see new eyes, see through new eyes, right? I thought the world would be different, and it's not. Like that scene
Yeah.
felt
It's a depressing scene.
it's a depressing scene. Like that scene felt a little out of place when I was first watching, like that very first time we kind of see the two of them together. Because before that, there
Mhm.
is that is her our introduction to her, and it's not really a love story between Jeff Bridges and this girl,
And it's
but
not
it
really that way in the book, by the way. He has like this like animosity for her in the book that I think is like less apparent in the movie. But you can still kind of feel it, I think.
yeah, I think they definitely make him out to be. I mean, I haven't read the book, but I would say in the book he seems like a nut or in the film, Jeff Bridges seems to genuinely care for his girlfriend. I mean, they obviously there's
Yeah.
that great conversation where they talk about, basically she's kind of suggesting that I might be pregnant and you want to marry a girl
Yeah.
like me and kind of like going through the whole talk of marriage and then they kind of just leave it at that. Like we only see we only see her again one more
Yeah.
time and he like
Yeah.
references her vaguely throughout the rest of the film, but we only see her again when she's like 6 months pregnant and uh
Hmm.
I think it's
We
the
don't we don't yeah,
yeah,
we're not around Jeff Bridges' character is Ernie. We're not around Ernie too much. I
no.
think it's just like Ernie and his wife are supposed to like reflect the differences between Billy and you know, what, Oma, right?
Mhm.
His temporary girlfriend. Um in terms of just like how they are different and how they are also the same,
Yeah.
right? In terms of like, and like throughout the movie, Ernie is like lamenting the fact that like his wife left him. He doesn't, he was married and, he loved her more than anything. And now that they're not together anymore, he's probably never going to see her again. Right. And so like he laments that throughout the movie constantly. Right. Like it's just kind of like, I just think it's like, one of those kind of like dichotomy kind of things where, you got like a younger guy and an older guy and, you know, it's just kind of like, analyzes it really like fleshes out those characters when they're together, you know what I mean? Or at least like when you're going back and forth between them.
Yeah. And I was very surprised because I thought this was going to be. I mean, I put all of my own expectations onto this and everything that I know about these kind of movies, and I was very much expecting it to be a Jeff Bridges story, right, where he kind of takes a back seat, kind of the older one kind of trains the younger one. But as you're saying, right, it's kind of it's the different paths of their life, and
Mhm.
his obsession of he can't let go of his own past, right? He's seeing his past in him, and he's trying to fix it, but he can't be fixed. I mean, I think of that final scene at the diner, which is just incredible. Like, what a great way to end a film.
Mhm.
Is just it's the two of them sitting at a
Mhm.
diner, and right, they're getting a cup of coffee, and they're
Yeah.
talking about this older man who's serving, right, this very old gentleman who is serving them their coffee.
Yeah.
And I mean, this whole film is about like getting older, right? This It's like a great fear
Yeah,
of
it
like,
is.
particularly like there's this like masculinity
Do you think he
of,
was ever, don't they say like, don't they, do you think he was ever young or something
yeah.
like that? Like, it's a great line. Yeah.
Do you think he was ever young? And then Jeff
Yeah.
Bridges says something to the effect of, what if he's happy? And just like
Yeah. What if he's happy?
the absurdity that this man could possibly be happy, like the idea that happiness can only come in youth, and it's kind of this thing that is fleeting and that's terrifying, and they're leaving that, and like it's never going to
Yeah.
come
And then
back,
there's
right?
also a fear. There's also like that fear that I think everyone has that like, you're gonna have to like work like demeaning jobs until you die,
Until you
basically.
die.
You know what I mean? Like that is like, yeah, like until you basically die, will forever, in order to just like survive, basically, you will have to like work demeaning jobs until like, yeah, you fall apart, which is like, I don't know if anyone on earth would want that to happen to them. In the United States, it happens often.
Happens all the time, right? You see those stories on the news all the time where they're like, we
Yeah.
just threw a retirement party for our
Yeah.
90-year-old coworker. And
Like I
it's like,
mean, like yeah, like at the grocery store. And I'm like, why the fuck is like a 90-year-old working at
yeah.
the grocery store? Like they shouldn't be like, yeah, that stuff sucks.
And it comes away with no real solutions, right? We're not coming away from this film being
No.
like, oh, but you know what? If we could just find happiness in our work, or if we can just do this one thing. I think John
Yeah.
Huston he, he's not prescribing anything, right? He's not saying that here's a solution. And even with this end of the film, right? They're sitting at that, like, they're not resolved. That like there's no fix here. We're not resolved morally. We're not resolved ethically. Like, we're not in a better place. These people haven't
Yeah.
become like these greater people, or they're kind of
They never
better.
really learned anything.
They learned nothing. They're kind of in the same space
Yeah.
they were in the beginning. I mean, right? He's
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
drunk, so he's still getting drunk. He hasn't like grown and become a better man. He's won this fight, but is he ever going to fight again? Very unclear. Probably not. And Jeff Bridges' character, maybe he's on the up and up, or maybe right, this is his future. And I think he kind of sees that. He's like, "Fuck, this is very likely where I'm going," and he's very afraid of that he's just going to end up just
Yeah.
like him.
Yeah. The ending of the book is actually different than the ending of the movie. Like the ending of the movie is, I think, like is invented for the movie. The ending of the book is a little more odd. It's like Ernie, he like had a fight in Salt Lake City and now he has to hitchhike. Like he doesn't have a way to get home. So he's picked up by like two women. Um, and like one of the women is driving and he's sitting in the back seat with the other. And like the woman driving like suddenly like gets jealous and upset and they kick him out of the car. So he's like in the middle of the desert alone and like he doesn't know where to go, which is like, you know, that's also I think like a good like metaphor, right? To like kind of
Yeah.
end on the book, being alone and kind of like the middle of like the desert out west, like Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I love it, and unfortunately, I do have to go to work. Uh, I know this episode's been kind of
Okay.
weird because we started at a weird day, weird time. Kind of had
Yeah,
that
it's just
that
like
that middle
going.
part, but I still think we got some really great stuff in it, and I think
Yeah, we talked enough, I think.
we talked about stuff, and I think we had
I
some
think,
good things to say.
yeah.
Do you want to? I mean, you've read the book,
Yeah, I'll
so
conclude.
why don't you conclude for us?
Well, I was just saying, like, I do love the book. I think the book is like a fantastic novel. And the movie's really good too. I just love kind of like the sense of place that John Huston is able to put together. And the cast is amazing. Like those cast, um, Stacy Keach is especially like really good. He's really good in the movie. And just yeah, I just kind of love like a good kind of like just kind of down in the rough, like kind of like boxing movie. Boxing is a great sport in terms of like film. And the movie is funny, it's sad. Again, I just love that sense of place that it evokes too. It's just like a really, really, really good, solid like film, 70s kind of boxing film. So I'm definitely gonna give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the favorite thing for me is just this sense of place. Like when I think of Stockton, California now, the very first thing I will always think of is this
Yeah,
film. And I
absolutely.
think that
Yeah.
that is a remarkable thing to do. I mean, there's a lot of films that take place in a lot of places. And I think so many films, even some of John Huston's earlier
Yeah.
work, don't really have a sense of place. And to do that, if nothing else,
Mhm.
right? If you cut everything else out of this film, just to do that alone is really spectacular. Although there
It's
all
good.
are a lot of other great things about this film, and I think the ending really hits me hard, just kind of like this emptiness and this fear of
That's
getting
great.
older, especially because we are getting older, right? We're going to be 29 years old. We're almost hitting 30. Still very
Right.
young, right? Still have a very long time to live and very
Yeah.
grateful for that. But right, I mean, we're in different phases of our lives now. I have Henry now. I'm a father. My parents are grandparents now, and we're moving kind of into this new stage, and it's kind of scary and new and interesting and fascinating. So, this is definitely a film, as so many of the films that we watch, that kind of hit at the very right time, and I'm really glad that I have it at
Yep.
this moment in my life. So I will also give this an 8 out of 10. All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo,
I'm on Letterboxd at Retro Andrew, RTR0 Andrew.
and you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I have nothing to say, and thank you all for listening.
Thanks again.